ingokko hivuhiluak hivuhiluaktu kangohun sigilawaaglaadissaamik ukua okamiassuttuarni augilaue okaluangimiattu naamakimiattu Andapi anda Oh, kanno. Hey, Henry. Takugo. Different chair.
Unusakut. Hello. Unusakut. Kawit kayo tunga. Tako ajiliyo ti ajiliyo ko lamay mata, nipiliyo ko lamay mata.
The camera has started to roll, and we are recording now. We will now proceed for the afternoon session. Good afternoon. Probably had a good lunch.
We'll start with Kitamute Regional Wildlife Board this afternoon. And you need 5 minutes to set up. Yeah, mami anak. Asya nungak. Ila takwa
change the program.
Kitamute umayulaging
Wildlife Board, please proceed. Thank you.
Just a reminder, make sure your cell phone is turned off. Make sure your cell phone is turned off. And before you speak to the mic, get close to the mic and state your name and which organization you're from. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Pa Ikwala. Kijangmute Wildlife Board, I'm the chair. Our colleague would have been here, but he'll be late. I have a short presentation, and the other two colleagues will give their presentation as well.
Yep.
Please move the mic closer. Okay.
Um, these are just my thoughts and what I kind of review in conjunction of and consideration of Inuit Cardamom Tokongi is important in the process of Inuit Cardamom Tokongi includes laws from long ago. We must try and maintain them to the present day. It is difficult but important to articulate and preserve Inuit Cardamom Tokongi Western culture and context. We Inuit know not to waste animal, not to play with animal, from the smallest mosquito to the biggest ocean mammal. We know not to bother them or just to play with them. As we know, each year the hunting season is different hunting season. We go hunting for some animals in the fall, others in the spring, winter, and each month is different. We have meeting with Rizalmit Inuit Association, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated staff. We appreciate their effort in keeping us informed, prepare us in this process. We are aware that each HTO have their own project, experience, and position on this plan. The Rizalmit Regional Wildlife Board is in support of their HTOs and individual position and submission. They submit to NPC, especially in considering different caribou herds and wildlife in each community as in a region. For example, we noticed that prairie caribou was not identified in Prince of Wales, and we'll need to follow up on our HTOs on this. In continuation of Inuit access to hunting and their wildlife is important for our generations to come. We continue to collaborate with regional wildlife offices, HTOs, needs and concerns in our wildlife. When agencies make laws that affect our community, they should meet with our community face to face and let us know what's happening. These organizations can also come to our AGM before they make the final decision. We would like more face-to-face consultation to happen, especially because we lose important information by trying to connect through the telephone and Zoom. We're looking forward to continue to work together with this plan and appreciate NPC for bringing the community's participants together with this meeting so that we learn from other organizations in process. All the mapping that we're doing, we're happy to see faces from NPC and staff, and know that who will assist us in our information.
This is my thoughts. We have prepared these presentations from years ago and endorsed by Kijangmute Wildlife Service and the community delegates to this board. We often meet here as a group and October 4 will be our next one.
4, 5, 6.
4, 5, 6 in Kokdoktok. We will have our annual meeting for the Kijangmute Wildlife Board. We often meet with Kivalek Wildlife Board, Kitakala Wildlife Board. We work with them. We have the same interests. Pamela will give a brief presentation, and Bobby Greenlee will be here, but he'll be late. So I'll hand it over to Peter. Thank you, Chair. Your name, please state your name and your organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter Gabalak, Vice Chair for KRWB. I just want to say welcome everybody to Cambridge Bay. And also, we serve 7 HDOs in Kijangmute. They all have their own mandates. So our Kijangmute Regional Board supports all the HDOs. And whatever decision they have to make, we comply with their wishes. And we deal with all kinds of wildlife from A to Z. That's all I got to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Tema. Yeah,
I will ask our
Sharon,
staff
if
to
there's
see
any
if
questions.
they have any questions. Sharon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jonathan, any questions?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is Jonathan Savoy from the Nunavut Planning Commission. And thank you very much for your presentation. As we noted yesterday, one potential area of discussion in regards to caribou habitat was the size of the buffer or distance around caribou freshwater crossings. In the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan, there's an included buffer of 10 kilometers, and some participants have recommended that that could be reduced to, for example, 5 kilometers. And we're just wondering if you have any comments on an appropriate distance around a caribou freshwater crossing for identification. Thank you.
Atigo, go ahead.
Thank you. Pamela Wong, Senior Research and Technical Advisor for the Kitikmeot Regional Wildlife Board. I'm just going to echo a bit of what Paul and Peter already mentioned. It's quite a broad region in the Kitikmeot, and each HTO might have their own preferences, so I suppose we'll look to them.
No more questions? Okay. We could discuss this during lunch too as the commissioners. I know I was asking the participant if they have any questions, and I guess to make it easier, I'll go by the communities and go, if there's no further question from the communities, I'll say that each community, if there's any question, raise your hand. but if there's not, I'll just go to the next communities. So, Joe Haven, bit, après
You have a question?
Yeah, kayo.
Thank you, Chair. Salamikachwali Johaven, to the panel, Kitchangmute Wildlife Board. I have a question and perhaps a statement. You mentioned IQ, Inuit Kauimayatokai, has been around for a long time. Everything mattered at the time at a to the harvested mammal. And to many elders and to us today, this still is a great concern. So when we hear people harvesting caribou winter or summer, I think the practice of sharing is missed sometimes. Many have harvested caribou, different parts, head, the skin, the entails of the caribou are being wasted a lot, and it's not the only time I mention this. I have been concerned about this for a long time. Proper harvesting and dressing of the caribou has to be taught. Perhaps even to a seasoned hunter, I might not be making sense, but this is what you have to teach, and to the other communities as well as a regional board. You have to teach skin, legs, and entails have to be properly used, dressed, and for you to consider as you meet with different HTOs in region. Will you teach this? That's all I have to say. Thank you. It's a statement, it's not a question, so you can take it as a statement panel. Any more questions from the community on the presentation by the panel? Go ahead.
Question from Jeannie?
Thank you, Jeannie. Hamlet Council, I have heard over the proceedings that the caribou crossing are part of the important areas to protect. And we also heard about the buffer zone of 10 kilometers each direction of a caribou crossing, freshwater crossing area. And up here we have different river systems. And the crossing areas, although there is no way to measure the distances that were mentioned, although there is none. And there are many crossing areas now. Some areas have a lot of wolves, and they're changing their crossing patterns because of this. It has been mentioned over time since yesterday, the distance on freshwater crossing. We know our animals. We know their crossing areas. when you travel inland and landmarks around Talukwa, including Napahotalik area, and to the islands on immediate vicinity of our community. We know that they are crossing now in vast areas. And to you, Nunavut Planning Commission, how will you handle buffer zone on fresh caribou crossing areas? What will you do?
Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sharon Ahalawak, Executive Director for the Planning Commission. I believe Jeannie is asking if you can clarify the buffer zone. Thank you. Sorry, misunderstanding. We'll take it as a comment. No, it's fine. We'll take it as comment. Thank you.
Yeah, it
was a comment. We'll bypass that. Question, Beverly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, KRWB. First of all, I'd like to say that it's great to see the Executive Director, Sharon, and also Polly Kualak mentioned our IQs. We always need to keep the IQs in the back of our mind when we have gatherings such as these. It's a good example, too, for our government of Nunavut to also practice when they do their sittings. So thank you very much for that. Pamela, you mentioned just a minute ago about each HTO having their own opinion on the different buffers or the kilometers in buffers. Unfortunately, Bobby can't be here, our chairman for HTO. He is at home with his wife is not feeling well. But our HTO would like to see the 10-kilometer buffers on the freshwater streams and rivers and areas. The reason why we agree with the 10-kilometer buffer is so that any kind of mining or any industry cannot disturb the freshwater areas. And this is a comment that I just received from Bobby to pass along. Thank you.
Your name and organization,
comment,
please.
Question.
KRWB Chair.
I just want to clarify on the buffer zone. This applies to the industry, tourism, and to the exploration, not just to be heard. This applies to people who are not out there actively harvesting. This is for the people who are using the land perhaps for work. We will talk about this in the regional HTOs, although it will be up to them on the buffer zone and how they deal with exploration, people coming up to use the land for work. And it's becoming clear now that the buffer zone will become very important. Question,
Gentleman on the other side, David.
thank you, Chair. David Tuteli Talokyoak Hamlet. My question to the panel, we are aware of your work in this region. When will you notify as you and we as communities? You are living in Johaven, close to Cambridge Bay and Talukyoak. Our polar bear quota in our region for the community of Cambridge Bay, Johaven, Talukyoak, near Kingakyuak, near Talukyoak, and other areas, harvesting areas near Cambridge Bay. So, what will be happening when policies are made where there are restrictions, say, towards polar bears? I have heard over the past, and I know this for a fact, that the polar bears are not stationary, they're roaming mammals. And I'll say this, and my brother and his father, during the spring when daylights were becoming longer in the area of Uyagahugulik near Johaven, north side of, we approached a polar bear. My brother shot it and killed it. And wildlife people at that time had that tattoo and tagged on the ear. And that was that time then when he saw the polar bear. We catch the wildlife officer, looked at the tattoo and the number. So when we were in the communities, we were asked to come into the community and told us the polar bear has been identified as to where it has been. And the tattooed in a polar bear was tattooed in Alaska, and it has traveled all this way to our region. And the polar bear in our region, when we harvested the three communities, Cambridge Bay, Johaven, Talukyoak, and I want you to be aware, and when you will do the polar bear harvest study, what have you learned? Thank you. A question to the panel, to your organizations. The question was directed towards Kijangmuk Wildlife Harvest Board. It's not related to NPC as a question to
namin
us.
kayo
It
man
can
nakata-
be discussed during the break
Mana
time
piliret no-
if you wish to
no
further
panay ko
pursue the
pilireng
the
ano man
question
pilireng
you
luwa ken
have
nakata
mentioned.
tamakwa ko di gim natakalwa si tamani
You
tunun
can
namin
ask very
upalugit
questions, but trying to stay within a topic.
Sammiga kan di kayo nalta. Kaya namig.
Thank you.
Ape ko di sa takan ka.
Any further questions?
Tamang pitakapalayng
It
wanangan
appears we have
registered
none from
participant.
delegates.
Any
What
question to the
about the
presentation?
registered attendees?
I don't see any hand. Kuya namig,
Thank
patrang
you.
taulit. Kuya namig, asya nung malta.
We'll
Isa
go
kalu kay
to the
tekwa
next
isa katatuit.
topic. Welcome
Kaya
if you
ikut
just have
katimajingit.
arrived.
Tabunga
KIA
tatuit isibaw tangal
members
Stanley.
and the
Bunga
chair,
tatuit.
Stanley,
Isa
welcome.
manlugit.
We
Stanley.
are looking forward to your
Masagisi.
presentation.
Up next is KI Board, and I would like to
KIA.
recognize the President Stanley and the board. And I think, John, you need 5 minutes before you start your presentation to set up, just quick 5 minutes to set up the computer. Kuya namig, pilakayang kin nakakarat, pilakayang yakingat,
We
Hunter
will
Nook,
now
Pia,
get back to the program.
Tunga sa
Let's
kasi,
proceed. Welcome.
kahit tiga malungaw,
Just
kinang mga
a reminder,
malaking nga mga
where your
And
name and your organization, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Stanley Anablak. I'm the president for the Kitakmiyut Inuit Association. I would also just like to introduce my board that's here with me. Clary Valek is our Economic Development Officer. Clara, if you could stand up. Bob Aki is our Social and Cultural Development Vice President. Atima Hadlari, who's our Economic and Wildlife Environmental VP, is not here at the moment. Our board member for Kugayuk is Tars Tingong.
Stanley, if you can speak to the microphone. Thank you.
How's that? Right on. Johnny is our board member for Taloyoak. Raymond is our board member for Joe Haven. Natasha is our board member for Cambridge Bay. And also Peter Taktawood is also here, our board member from Kogloktok. So those are our board members. Our meetings happening at the same time as your meetings are happening, but I see you guys are having a much heated discussion because it's very, very hot in here. Ours is a lot cooler, so again, thank you very much, Mr. Chair and board members for Nunavut Planning Commission. It's good to see some familiar faces. Before I begin, I just want to get into my opening remarks regarding the Kitakmiyut Inuit Association presentation for this hearing. I would like to take a minute to recognize Ms. Lucy Taipana. Lucy was a spouse of our late Simon Taipana, who was one of our key negotiators for the Nunavut Agreement. Simon was a very instrumental part of the Kitakmiyut team, of our negotiators. The Kitakmiyut Inuit Association also recognized him by having a boardroom named after him in our old KI office building. Please help me in honoring Lucy Taipana, as Simon is no longer with us. Just to get into my opening remarks, you all know my team here, I believe. Peter Taptuna and Luigi Toretti. Mike? Yep. Setterington. I haven't seen everybody for over 2 years, I think, since COVID came, so we forget who we are or who they are. So just to get in, Inuit Birthright Organization, established in 1976 and assumed birthright status when the Nunavut Agreement received royal assent. In 2020, there were 6,500 Kitakmiyut Inuit members, 5,000 of voting age. Our mandate to manage the Kitakmiyut Inuit lands and resources, to protect and to promote the social, cultural, political, environmental, and economic well-being of Kitakmiyut Inuit. KI was designated Inuit organization under the Nunavut Agreement, Section 39.1.3. The articles are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14, 19, 20, 21, 26, 37, and 41 referred to NTI's DIO master list. The KIA Kitamute Inuit owns 104,852.42 square kilometers of surface Inuit-owned lands. As designated Inuit organization functions impacted by the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan, Article 8, Parks, Article 9, Conservation Areas, Article 19, Title II, Inuit-owned lands, Article 21, Entry and Access, Article 26, Inuit Impact and Benefit Agreements. In order for the Kitamute Inuit Association to best serve, represent, and look to future well-being of Kitamute Inuit, our responsibilities as DIO are primarily important and must be preserved. The Nunavut Land Use Plan must not unduly restrict or inhibit DIO functions and responsibilities. Limited use and conditional use designation inhibit or restrict DIO functions and responsibilities. The Kitamute Inuit Association provided a detailed submission to the Nunavut Planning Commission regarding its concern about the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan on April 15, 2022. The Kitamute Inuit Association also worked with NT Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, Kivallik Inuit Association, and the Kigiktani Inuit Association on a joint submission. This presentation cannot cover all the details provided in those submissions due to the time limits, so we are presenting a summary of our key points. Kitamute Inuit Association Board Resolution on the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan in Cambridge Bay on June 27 to 29, 2022. The KI Executive Director, supported by the Department of Lands and Environment, prepared a statement for publication indicating that KI cannot support approval of the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan in its current form. The KI Executive Director wrote right in the Planning Commission setting out KI's concerns with the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan and asking that NPC to postpone a hearing planned for Cambridge Bay in September while changes are made to the plan. Nunavut Planning Commission should advise that if no changes are made to the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan and the hearing goes ahead, that KI will oppose approval of the plan. So this letter requesting a postponement was sent to Nunavut Planning Commission on July 19, 2022. And that's my opening remarks, and I'll let our team take over from here, as I have to get back to my board meeting, and I hope I can get back before you guys all leave before end of the week. Taima.
Just a reminder to state your name and your organization. I appreciate that you were able to come during your board meeting, so thank you, Stanley. Okay. Go ahead.
I'll carry on as per instructed
Thank you.
my president. Commissioner I'll carry on here. I'm just going to, for the sake of time, paraphrase some of these slides that are up there. on a presentation. As per Article 17 of the Nunavut Agreement, the primary purpose of Inuit-owned lands shall be to provide Inuit with rights in land that promotes economic self-sufficiency of Inuit through time, in a manner consistent with Inuit social and cultural needs and aspirations. Inuit-owned lands include areas valued for renewable resources, development of non-renewable resources, commercial value, and archaeological, historical, or cultural importance. In other words, Mr. Chairman, IOLs were selected for mixed uses. Inuit-owned lands shall, to the extent possible, provide for the mix of characteristics outlined above in order to secure balanced economic development. However, the relative weighting of characteristics with respect to any particular community or region shall turn on the actual and potential economic opportunities at hand and the particular community or regional preferences. Again, Mr. Chairman, the emphasis is on mixed use. Next slide. This draft does not allow the DIO to promote economic self-sufficiency of Inuit through time. Nor does it allow the DIO to consider the actual and potential economic opportunities at hand and the particular community or regional preferences. Inuit economic self-sufficiency and particular community or regional preferences are hindered by limited and conditional use designations on Inuit-owned lands. The KI recommends that these designations must be replaced with mixed use, and a transportation corridor, access to Inuit-owned land, must be assured. Article 11 of the Nunavut Agreement specifies that special attention must be devoted to protecting and promoting the existing and future well-being of Inuit and Inuit-owned lands. And the land use planning process shall apply to Inuit-owned lands. The land use plan shall take into account Inuit goals and objectives for Inuit-owned lands. Article 17 sets the parameters of these goals and objectives, promote economic self-sufficiency of Inuit through time. Inuit-owned lands with mixed-use characteristics, the actual and potential economic opportunities at hand, and the particular community and regional and/or regional preferences. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, the draft takes away Inuit decision-making authority on over half of the land we have in the Qiddiqmud region. More than half of the opportunity that Qiddiqmud Inuit Association has to look to future well-being of Qiddiqmud Inuit has been eliminated by this draft. The only classification that will allow Qiddiqmud Inuit Association to maintain our DIO functions and responsibilities is for a new land use plan to designate IOLs, Inuit-owned lands, as mixed use, and to assure transportation corridor access to Inuit-owned lands. This draft, 2021 draft land use plan is too focused on area conservation at the expense of economic development, the standard of living, and the quality of life for Qidalmut Inuit. It fails to recognize the management effort of Qidalmut Inuit Association, which have included conservation as an objective of Inuit-owned land uses. Conservation is a Qidalmut Inuit goal. 3 Inuit-owned land parcels are currently close to development, and we have submitted the Hilkata River Community Area of Interest as a conservation area. For the DIOs, to manage Inuit-owned lands as outlined in Article 17, the limited and conditional use designations must be replaced with mixed use, and transportation corridor access to IOL must be assured. The limited use designation in this draft inhibit terms and conditions in existing conservation areas Inuit impact benefit agreements. Example, migratory bird areas, territorial park, heritage rivers. The Inuit impact benefits agreements recognize and allow some development potential within those conservation areas. This draft, as is, denies that potential. The draft inhibits the potential for Inuit to negotiate Inuit impact benefits agreements for future conservation areas. IIBAs, Inuit impact benefit agreements, cannot be negotiated in limited and conditional use areas in a land use plan. Qidalmut Inuit will see no benefit and will not be involved in management decision making in those areas. The Government of Canada cannot use Nunavut land use plan to meet its international obligations to protect 25% of land and water by 2025 and increase it to 30% by 2030. Without first acknowledging their obligation to Inuit by negotiating a conservation area Inuit impact benefits agreement to meet those targets. As with our repeated recommendation, mixed use is the only designation that does not hinder our designated functions and responsibilities, including conservation measures on Inuit-owned lands. The KIA appreciates the efforts and expenses the Nunavut Planning Commission has undertaken to consult Nunavut. The shortcomings we see are that both Inuit and the Commission were not clearly informed of the land use management and regulatory tools already in place that the plan should have enhanced. The KI recommends that the Commission incorporate a section that identifies and reviews the currently available regulatory tools. The plan must work with the tools already existing instead of replacing them. This draft is deficient and short-sighted in regarding transportation corridors in the Qidalmut and in Nunavut as a whole. The Nunavut land use plan must allow the development of transportation corridors in the Qidalmut. The Utkwisisalik National Park Inuit Impact Benefits Agreement creates a process to consider a transportation access corridor through the park to keep mineral development options available for the benefit of Inuit. This draft denies that possibility. Qidalmiut Inuit communities lie north and west of the park, and a transportation corridor could provide future socio-economic benefits in the East Qidalmiut. The new land use plan must not interfere with the terms agreed to upon in our Inuit Impact Benefits Agreement. And the DIOs must have the capacity to exercise their Inuit Impact Benefit Agreement's authorized roles and responsibilities. A mixed-use designation on Inuit-owned lands will allow the DIO to do so. Area protection does not make sense in Qidalmiut because calving grounds change regularly. Several tools already exist that are specifically designed to protect caribou and other wildlife. Area protection should not be used as a substitute for caribou protection. Mr. Chairman, in closing, the new land use plan must reflect the goals and objectives of Inuit-owned lands, which, as stated in Article 17, are mixed use. Additionally, the new land use plan must not hinder DIO authorities nor interfere with existing Inuit Impact Benefit Agreements. Thank you very much, Isigota Commissioners, for taking the time to listen to this presentation. We'll be happy to take questions. Kona.
Kuyanimik, Temas Satiavani, Hobbit, Temasino Namamat,
Proceed.
Sharon,
Sharon,
if there's any questions.
questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sharon Ahalawak, Executive Director for the Nunavut Planning Commissions. Staff do have questions. I will start with Brian Aglukak. Thank you.
Kuyanmi Sharon, thank you, Mr. Chair. Peter, I'm going to read a section of the Land Claims Agreement under Article 17. Inuit-owned lands shall, to the extent possible, provide for a mix of the characteristics outlined above in order to secure balanced economic development. However, the relative weighing of the characteristics with respect to any particular community or region shall turn on the actual and potential economic opportunities at hand and the particular community or regional preference. I'm also going to read the simplified version of the claim that's posted in NPI's website. If I can find it. It's not on my screen. Give me a second. Here it is. No, it's not. Here. Yeah, sorry. It's the plain language version. I lost it. Give me a second. I'm sorry. It moved on me. Here it is. Inuit will have the right to use their land for economic self-sufficiency. Inuit will also have the right to live in a way that is true to Inuit culture and society on their lands. And in particular, Inuit in each community will decide which lands are most important to them and the potential uses they have and that they will put to. So basically, what I'd like to understand and get more clarity from the Qidalmiut Inuit Association is the NPC has been consulting extensively on different versions of the plan since 2012 with Inuit organizations, NTI, the RIAs, government departments, as well as community residents. And what we constantly hear is that there's a difference between how Inuit want their areas of interest or Inuit areas of their interest versus what the regional Inuit associations want, and they're far apart. And we heard some of that today. Most communities, if not all communities, regardless of IOL or Crown land, want specific areas within your parcels, within the IOL parcels and Crown lands protected. And so in hearing your presentation today, there's a huge gap. So I'm wondering if you can explain to us or to the NPC, what are you doing to bridge that gap? Thank you.
Peter?
And I think so. Peter Tapluna, Community Association, and I thank Brian for that question. We have made every effort to ensure that our DIO status, as outlined in the Nunavut Agreement, is not hindered. There's been over 200 articles and functions designated to Inuit organizations, and of course, Inuit Association. And one of the designations is the management and authority and jurisdiction over Inuit-owned lands within the region. We want to ensure that our authority as a designated Inuit organization is not hindered, impeded, as per this draft 2001 draft land use plan. We want the ability to negotiate IIBAs for conservation areas and other matters that would include long-term future benefits for Inuit. I think under the DIO designation, only KIA, the Kirkwood Inuit Association, has the ability to negotiate Inuit impact benefits agreements, irregardless of whether it's development, conservation area, and we want to maintain that for the benefit of long-term benefit of Inuit of Kirkwood. If I can, Mr. Chairman, I can have my colleague here supplement with other information on that. Mr. Chair, if I can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Luigi Toretti, consultant to the Kitamaori Inuit Association. Kwana Peter, Kwana Mr. Chair. Brian, thank you for the question. The NPC, as we've noted in our presentation, the NPC has done an excellent job consulting. They've gone to the communities, they've gone to the communities multiple times. The challenge that we see and the divide that the NPC is talking about, that the NPC sees in terms of our presentation, the Kitamaori Inuit Association presentation, and the feedback that you're getting from the communities is actually quite easy to explain. It is a matter of the questions that are asked at the community consultations and the information that is shared or how the information is presented. For example, one of the challenges that we have had as an organization is to communicate that the Kitamaori Inuit Association, to communicate to NPC that the Kitamaori Inuit Association is the designated Inuit association or organization for Inuit-owned lands. surface lands. As DIO for Inuit-owned lands, any activity or any request for access, the title and the request for access on Inuit-owned lands has to come through the KIA, the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. So, as the DIO, it is okay for the NPC to go to the communities and to say, or to ask the questions. This is an area of interest. It has valued wildlife components. And are you interested in protecting it? Of course, the question is going to be yes. What has not been presented is there is IOL in those areas that are being suggested as being protected. The Kitikmeot Inuit Association has the mandate for title and access, and that they can negotiate. They also have the mandate for Inuit Impact Benefits Agreement to negotiate those. So, of course, the Inuit may want to protect it, and that's what the feedback that the Commission receives at the community meetings. But the flip side of what opportunities do we have to protect it hasn't fully been explored because the KIA was not able to present alternatives to those limited use area designations that the NPC was presenting. Taima.
Brian. Further your questions, please.
Thank you, Luigi. Thank you, Peter. Just again, land use planning under Article 11 includes a human factor, and that human factor is the Inuit cultural lifestyle, the hunting lifestyle, the traditional oral language that we use in Inuktitut. All of that under the claim is protected, and I respect and we understand the issue with the IABA process and what have you. But then again, also the NPC is mandated to protect that Inuit lifestyle. And as I said, there is a huge gap between what the KIA, the Regional Association in this region, and what we heard from the community residents. The gap is huge, and we just need to hear and learn what you are doing to bridge that gap. What's the process you're using based on the fact that what you're saying and what the communities are saying are miles apart, and we haven't heard that yet. Thank you. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Luigi Toretti, consultant to the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. Mr. Chair, can we have a minute or two to prepare a response to that?
Just another reminder too, but if you guys want to answer just like everybody else in written, you also have that opportunity to do. Just like everybody else here that was presenting today, if you want to answer in writing, you can also have that option. But if you want to take a quick 2 minutes and get back to us, I'm okay with that too. My question is, should we continue with the question and get back to that answer, or do you want to take a quick break and answer it? Atigo, Peter?
Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Mr. Chair, I want to thank Brian, for those questions. Yes, it is really critical that we fully understand the impacts of these land use designations as it pertains to Inuit-owned lands. We have to understand that, all of us do have to understand that there are certain differing interests and understanding of DIO functions and of the articles of the Nunavut Agreement. And one of the ways that we've been trying to close that gap is coming to the communities and taking part or going to certain AGMs of the Regional Wildlife Board to explain some of our functions and their functions. We've done that in October of 2021, also in April of this year, and we intend to do that again in October. So there is efforts by KIA to not consolidate, but to assure and make everyone aware of each other's functions, because they do differ under DIO designations and functions. As you know, there's always ongoing efforts, and we try our best to ensure that our communities understand. There are differing number of DIOs, which pertain to our RWO, HTO. They have two functions. They're designated a couple of functions from the new article, and 8 different DIO functions in conjunction with other DIOs. So at the end of the day, we do make efforts to have our communities understand their roles and responsibilities, and want to ensure that they understand the roles of the DIOs, that DIO functions of Kitamid Inuit Association. That's going to take time, and we appreciate the time that NPC, the Commission, has given us to put these answers and responses and questions for them to take back to their communities and make more efforts to fully understand the impacts of Inuit-owned lands that the Kitamid Inuit Association is under the designation is authorized with the responsibilities and management of Inuit-owned lands for all of Kitamid Inuit. I hope that gets close to answering your question, but again, I'd like, Mr. Chairman, if I can, I'd like my colleague to supplement more for more clarification, if I can, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Matigo. Luis?
Go ahead, Louis.
Kwana, Luigi Toretti, consultant to the Kitamid Inuit Association. Thank you for the question once again, Brian. The KIA has actually been managing land, and we've actually looked through our records. Our records date back to 1994 in terms of identifying Inuit-owned land parcels to protect in the sense of closing to development. So records date back to 1994. So the Kitamid Inuit Association has been managing lands for multiple uses for at least a period of almost 3 decades. During that time frame, 9 Inuit-owned parcels were closed to development. And as my colleague here has mentioned, 3 of them remain closed. That does not include the Hukatuk River area, which was submitted by the Kitamid Inuit Association. Those Inuit-owned parcels that are within that conservation area that was submitted by the KIA as a result of a board resolution, there are additional parcels in there that are effectively closed to Inuit-owned land. The process the KIA goes through when there is an interest in accessing Inuit-owned land is quite a detailed process. We have community beneficiary committees in all of the communities in the Kitermeu. So if there is a request to access Inuit-owned land, one of the first activities that takes place is for KIA to contact those CBCs and get feedback from them. So specifically to your question of, Brian, your question of what is the Kitermeu Inuit Association doing to bridge that gap, we've been doing it for, that's the process that we've been undertaking for nearly 30 years. I hope that clarifies the question or answers the question. Otherwise, we can, if there's a follow-up question, we'll listen. My apologies, Mr. Chair. Peter, is there anything that you would like to add to that? Taima.
And Namik.
Thank you.
Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your responses. It's appreciated. I just want to refocus. This morning we heard from the communities. We heard from Tulayoak, Joe Haven, Cambridge Bay, Kogaloktok, Kugaruk, that what their priorities are, and the Commission is looking for solutions of how to bridge the competing interests or the positions and the views, and fully respects the DIO's authorities. There's never any question of the Kitikmeot Inuit Association authority over land. In Article 11, it does say that Inuit-owned lands shall be included in the land use plan, and what commissioners are looking for are solutions, opportunities of how we can meet the needs. We've heard very strongly from the hamlet of Tulayoak and Spence Bay hunters and trappers. They want full protection on the Boothia Peninsula this morning, as one position, giving an example. And your position is that we should defer to the DIO, but the Commission must listen to everyone. So we're looking if you can provide a solution. How do we bridge that gap? Or do you have any suggestions of how we work together to meet both your needs and the community members' needs? And after that, Mr. Chair, I'll be going back to our staff for further questions. Thank you.
And Namik. Peter, go ahead.
Peter Taptunak, Inuit Association, and thank you, Sharon, for the question. It's a very good question. I appreciate the fact that Tulayoak has been working on this for many, many years, and so has the negotiation of the land claims agreement. It took over 30 years to complete the land claim process, which Inuit wanted for ownership of land and decision-making powers when it comes to ownership of lands. And again, I got to say that KI appreciates the fact that Tulayoak, both the hamlet and HCO there, have been working diligently to try and improve things within their communities and their organization. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of things that's got to be taking place. A lot of discussions have to take place. With COVID last 2.5 years, practically, again, it's been a very difficult trek over the past 2 years with the pandemic. We're finally getting back, and at times our capacity within our organization is very limited too. There's many, many files that Inuit Association handles, and with very little staff. But at the end of the day, we want to ensure that everybody understands fully the pros and cons. We did invite the manager of Spence Bay HTO to Apollo to have a discussion, to lay that baseline down for discussion. Last year, we had conversations back and forth, the implications, and trying to figure out ways to help move their wish of having a conservation area. And again, I stated before that once you designate Inuit-owned lands within the Boothia Peninsula, Inuit Association has surface lands, Inuit-owned land of almost 12,000 square kilometers. That's a huge land mass, and there's that ability for Inuit Association to work with Talaljuaq to ensure that if there's going to be any conservation designation, that we have the ability to negotiate long-term benefits rather than relying on short-term grants and funding that may leave the community with a very, I guess you could say, desperate situation. Some of these programs are developed by governments. IPCA is not a legislated program from the federal government, so it does not trigger a need for Inuit Impact Benefits Agreement, meaning we can't negotiate. It does not trigger the need to negotiate an impact benefit agreement. If the area is conserved in a different program, such as a national park, national wildlife area, there is that ability for a Inuit Association as a designated organization to negotiate the Inuit Impact Benefit Agreement for long-term benefits of the community. So these things there's a lot of moving parts to this. There is a territorial government that's negotiating devolution. They have to play a key part in this. It takes many, many parties to eventually come up with an agreement between differing views of things out there. As NPC has noted, as the Commission have noted, there's all differing viewpoints of lands and conservation areas and development. That'll never go away. But at the end of the day, Inuit Association wants to ensure that the communities have this potential opportunity to benefit long term rather than the short term. Tayo mapanaw, Mr. Chairman, put in there.
Thank you.
Aprecio ka masuli.
Any further
Staff?
questions?
Jonathan, go ahead.
NPC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is Jonathan Savoy from the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you to the group for the presentation. I'll note that under the Nunavut Agreement, the Nunavut Planning Commission was established as a negotiated benefit to provide land use planning for the territory. And this is meant to guide and direct resource use and development in the territory, and isn't much more specific than that. This draft plan takes the approach of recommending a series of land use designations to manage land use in the territory through things like limited use areas, conditional use areas, and the identification of valued components. NTI and the RIAs have advocated for a distinct approach approach to planning on Inuit-owned lands, and our understanding in the presentation today is that the Kitikmeot Inuit Association recommends mixed-use designations on all Inuit-owned lands parcels, with perhaps a few exceptions for maybe things like the Hukatak River. Given that mixed use would not include tools like prohibiting uses outright, seasonal restrictions on activities, setbacks from key areas, other seasonal requirements, for example, on polar bear denning areas, we're hearing that none of those tools are appropriate on Inuit-owned lands from the point of view of the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. I guess we're curious as to how a mixed-use designation that only includes the identification of valued components reflects a distinct approach on Inuit-owned lands and adds value to Nunavut's regulatory process. Thank you.
Okay, Namik Jonathan, go ahead.
Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot Inuit Association. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do want to answer the question. We would like to discuss it before we answer it fully. Nakoyuk?
Namik? Any other? Okay, hold on. Are you good? Whenever you're ready, go ahead. Oh, just a reminder too, we've been hearing a lot of acronym like ROA. If you can pronounce the whole thing instead of just ROA and stuff like that. Thank you, we appreciate it. Thank you. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Commissioners, and thank you very much for that question. Of course, as a designated organization, we want the responsibility and authority maintained with Inuit. Under the mixed-use designation, Inuit would have that responsibility, whether they want the Inuit-owned parcel, Inuit-owned lands, whether it's for conservation, development, or other things. We do have other tools that communities and DIOs can use, of course, whether it's conservation or development. There's other regulatory agencies, IPGs, that exist in Nunavut that are established through the Nunavut Agreement, such as Nunavut Impact Review Board, Nunavut Water Board, and for any kind of discussions on whether it's including Nunavut Wildlife Management Board, they do have the responsibility to designate or approve conservation areas through that NWNB process that was established through the Nunavut Agreement. So at the end of the day, we want the decision-making powers to be left with the Inuit organizations and the Inuit in their respective communities on Inuit-owned lands, whether it's development, conservation areas or otherwise, with designation of limited use designations on Inuit-owned land. That would take the power away from the Inuit communities and, of course, a designated Inuit organization.
Namik, Sharon, go ahead. Okay, Jonathan?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jonathan Savoy with the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thank you, Peter, for that response. Just one point of clarification. Again, the implication from your presentation is that limited use and conditional use designations are not appropriate on Inuit-owned lands generally. And could you just clarify for the record whether that extends to the community of Kugaruk's community drinking water supply as an example of a limited use area with Inuit-owned lands parcels within that particular area? Thank you.
Tigo, go ahead.
Luigi Toretti, Katermeo Inuit Association. Clarification requested. Please, Jonathan, can you speak to the limited use components there?
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The limited use designation for the community of Kugaruk's community drinking water supply includes year-round prohibitions on industrial activities, including mineral exploration and development and oil and gas exploration and development. I could check that for the exact list, but certainly those two. Thank you.
Okay, Namik, go ahead.
So, Luigi Toretti, Katermeo Inuit Association. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the clarification, Jonathan. If there was, so this is essentially a process question for the IA. If there was any activity that was going to be taking place, let's not even talk about, let's clear the waters a little bit and not even talk about the land use plan as is right now, right? So if there was an activity that was of interest that would be proposed on the drinking water area of Kugaruk, the project proponent, because it is Inuit-owned land, would come to us, would come to the Katermeo Inuit Association. We would go to the Kugaruk CBC, and they would inform us that that is our drinking water supply. And my apologies, Mr. Chair. CBC means Community Beneficiary Committees. My apologies to the translators. So the process would be, sorry, that threw me off. So the process would be that we would go to the communities and ask them for advice before any kind of activity would actually hit the ground, because it is Inuit-owned land and nothing can happen before Inuit say yay or no. And so does that answer your question, Jonathan? I don't know if I can make it clearer than that. Mr. Chair, go on.
Okay, Namik. Jonathan, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Luigi. At the Commission, we're certainly aware of the process as it exists for the management of lands in the territory, including on Inuit-owned lands. And I think just in response, I guess I'm interpreting that the Kitikmeot Inuit Association would also not be in favor of including outright prohibitions on the community of Kugaruk's drinking water supply. And just note that there are benefits of land use planning from having an overarching vision for the territory and establishing in advance some measure of guidance on how lands are to be used in the territory. And that's the process we've been undertaking for 15 years. And we certainly appreciate the mandate and responsibility of the Kitikmeot Inuit Association, at the same time trying to fulfill the Commission's mandate and obligation to provide land use planning for the territory that guides and directs resource use and development. So if there are areas in the territory where certain uses can be agreed upon to not be appropriate, that can be included in the draft plan to provide guidance for all parties to land use in Nunavut. But I think you've clarified the position on these parcels. Thank you very much.
Okay, Namik, go ahead.
Luigi Toretti, Kitikmeot, consultant to the Kitikmeot Inuit Association. And just a point of clarification, yes, there are possibilities to work together. The challenge that the Kitikmeot Inuit Association has always had is the association has decision-making authority on Inuit-owned land. And now, all of a sudden, it is the NPC that is making those decisions for the designated Inuit organization. With a mixed-use classification, what would basically happen is the Commission says it's mixed use, however it is on IOL, you need to speak to the Kitikmeot Inuit Association if it's in the Kitikmeot, and we would be the organization that would likely say no to a project like that. So I think there is possibility, but of collaboration. But the authority to say yes or no, the Kitikmeot Inuit Association would like to maintain if it is on Inuit-owned land. Nakoyo?
Okay, Namik. Sharon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the comments. Sharon Hallowack, Executive Director, Nunavut Planning Commission. So, in light of our conversation, and these are tough discussions that need to be had, we heard closing remarks from Tulayoak this morning that they do want to work with the Kitikmeot Inuit Association, and hopefully that they can find solutions. But if there is a disagreement, they requested that the community voice be the one that is heard. Could you provide a recommendation to us in light of your conversation, how the Commission find a solution to that particular issue? Because we do need to listen to everyone, and it's imperative that commissioners hear and everyone understands the views. And if you could give us direction on that or guidance, it would be appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Namik? Peter? Peter?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Hallowack. Yes, we were here listening to the presentation of Tulayoak SBHTO, and of course the hamlet. And as I stated earlier, we applaud the efforts that they've made as a small community to try and bolster their economics through conservation initiatives, as they have stated. It's very difficult to get all parties when you want to create a conservation area. Some of these things do take time, and again, it involves a lot of parties, community members, and discussions on Inuit-owned land. Inuit-owned lands, the surface Inuit-owned lands that Kitikmeot Inuit Association is designated as authority and responsible for IOLs in Qirilmut. The IOL parcels, Inuit-owned lands, belong to all of Qirilmut. It doesn't belong to one single community. It does not belong to one single Inuk individual. It belongs to all the Inuit of the region. So when it comes to determining how impacts are made between communities regarding Inuit-owned land, there has to be a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion and consultation. We applaud the efforts that Talaroc has made to try and establish an IPCA, but at the same time, we still want to maintain the ability to potentially negotiate IIBAs for protected areas that the community wants. We don't want that ability and responsibility taken away, and we do have to communicate more with the communities, not just Talaroc, with all the communities, to ensure that the goals and objective of negotiating land claims and Inuit owning lands is met. We do not want that ability taken away for where Inuit lose the potential benefits of long-term conservation area, or for that matter, possibly even development. That would be the community's choice. And again, on Inuit-owned lands, we do not want impediments or that ability taken away from Inuit.
One more question. Yep, sounds good. I know there's been quite a few questions, and it's pretty much 3 o'clock. Before I go to the community's representative, we'll take a quick 15-minute break, and then we can resume at 3:10. 10 after 3. Thank you. Telota, Pilgatinut. Kaya na make kahit yutik reminder,
Just a
cell
reminder.
phone turned off. And when you're speaking, state your name and who in your organizations. And we were told to slow down when we're talking, so just keep that in mind too. We have translators, interpreters, and if we can try and avoid using acronyms, if we can try and avoid that too, would be great. We
will proceed again. There were some questions
Beverly
from
had a
Cambridge
question.
Bay. Beverly?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Beverly McSaga, manager of Iqaluqtuuchaq HTO. I had a question, but first I'd just like to mention that if we could speak in plain language, some of us don't understand the legal or consulting languages. Thank you. I have, I'm going to ask KIA and maybe NTI could take some notes as well as for clarification. Can HTOs or any Nunavut beneficiary stake a piece of land that is on Inuit-owned or Crown lands? For example, this morning Taloqoyoaq mentioned they wanted to attempt to build a fishing lodge. Would they be able to stake an area of their choosing on if it's on Inuit or Crown lands? And the same question would apply for Nunavut beneficiaries. As we know, or in our community, we have one elder who has a cabin at the mainland on the Ken Peninsula. I am not sure how much land he is staked, but it is out in the Hektinnak area, like I mentioned, on the Ken Peninsula. Thank you.
Peter? Go ahead.
And thank you for the question, Beverly. It is a little bit difficult to answer this question at this time. I think I don't have that background knowledge of the lodges, but when it comes to, sorry, I'll talk slower. When it comes to requests for use of any kind of development or inputting any type of infrastructure on Inuit-owned land, there is a process. It first goes to the KIA and the Community Beneficiaries Committee to assess and make recommendations on how the process is used. And of course, there's multiple organizations, including possibly GN, that would license an operation like that. So there's a process. We can certainly try and clarify that at a later date if we're allowed to write to the HTO on clarifying the questions that you have. Time off for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
You have another question, Beverly?
Question.
Tema. Any other question? Oh, Jeannie had a question. Embe, Antigo, Aperigueret.
Thank you, Chair. Jimmy Ulikatelik. HTO.
Thank you for your presentation, Peter. For the record, SPHDAs, they, under the Article 4, Article 5, and Article 6, we're basing on that. We looked at everything. We looked at parks, sanctuation, all that, but IPCA fit us best for what we want to do, and IPCA, and therefore we want to work with you to get a IIBA. We need your help to do an IIBA. You said earlier you got records from 1994. That was about the time we started trying to protect Alberto, 1994. So, yeah, under Article 5, under the land claim, we're basing on those where the Inuit in our settlement, area, know what they want in that place, not 800 miles where they are. So we want to work with you to get an IIBA. We've been trying to protect Alberto since 1994, but it never lifted off until like 2016. That's when we really started the ball rolling. This, because the community members don't want any mining in Alberto, we're trying to create jobs for them. And the way we want is through tourism, sport hunting, and cut and wrap facility. So an IPCA need impact beneficiary agreement. So we want to work with you on that to get it started, get it going, because we created 10 full-time jobs since we started, and we could create more if we get our IPCA.
Peter?
I'll try and respond to that question and answer some of the parts of the question. Thank you, Jimmy, for the question. It's a very interesting question. You indicated that you've been really trying to push this file forward for conservation since 1994. Sorry, I'll slow down. Being a staffer, I can't make any commitments to say whether we're going to create a conservation area. There is a process. The process is usually a letter to the board or executive director where the DIOs such as KI can make a decision. As I stated earlier, it's very difficult to, if not impossible, to negotiate IIBA on Inuit-owned lands when it's under limited use. And also an IPCA, Indigenous, sorry, I won't use the acronym again, Indigenous Protected Conservation Area, is a program that's not federally legislated, meaning there's no ability through the Nunavut agreement for a DIO to negotiate an IIBA. It doesn't trigger that. But your concerns were heard. There's a number of people, KI staff and others that heard your presentation and your question. I can't make that commitment as a staffer, but we'll certainly bring it back to our leadership.
Thank you.
Another reminder about acronym. If you can say the whole thing instead of the acronym, we appreciate it. Namatok. You have a further question? No, Namatok. Jeannie also have a question. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Thank you, Senior Hamlet of Talukwa. At the KIA meeting, I was here as a representative for women. I sat at that meeting. Amanda Main Kovalak and I made a presentation to the group according to Bhutia Peninsula. They were requesting for the protection of Bhutia Peninsula, but at the time COVID-19 was in full swing. You as KIA, you have been told we have requested that full protection of Bhutia Peninsula. And it's a huge territory. Our request for the protection has not been adhered to. Is it due to its size, that what is on the land? And we were at that meeting requesting what we want and how Bhutia Peninsula should be. And at the time we were rejected, nothing came out of it. Is this due to the size of the land and what its potential is? You did not support us. You did not give us firm replies. KIA at the meeting, we came at numerous times to talk to you what our concerns are in this region. And now, at that time, Kovalak and Amanda gave a good presentation. How many years has it been since anything has happened from KIA to the request we have made from the past? Are you just letting it go? You're not going to act on it? But I think working relationship is at strain. I think there are times when you have no actual powers to the request we have made with the land we want it protected. Are you being stopped by other organizations, say federal government? We just don't want a small part of the Bhutia Peninsula. We want the entire area for our use. Even government of Nunavut has been pretty silent. I know our requests are falling into futile ears, and CBC community, CBC have heard from them that you are dealing with this local group regarding our large land. Thank you.
Peter, go ahead.
And Commissioners, thank you, Jeannie, for the question. As I understand it from the H2O manager, this effort has been ongoing since, I think in a presentation indicated 1972 and later stated 1994. It seems like a long time. There's a lot of factors that's got to be considered. And thank you for the question, Jeannie, when you indicated that when you ask if there's, when you ask if there's other pressures that prevents Kilometer Association from moving the file forward. As you can recall, the government of Nunavut negotiated a devolution agreement, and they do have an AIP, and at one point the Premier had written a letter to the Prime Minister indicating that no more conservation areas be set until be established. No more conservation areas be established until devolution is done. And that's part of some of these things that slows things down. And according to the Premier's letter, public letter, it indicated that they want to have a conservation strategy before the federal government starts putting in establishing conservation areas. And that's not the whole reason why things slow down. It does take time to get all parties together. There's multiple discussions that do got to take place, and consultation do cost money. And again, KI applauds the efforts of Tuttle making those efforts. And again, I can't make that determination for the leadership. We want to get some direction from them when it comes to conservation areas. As you know, Gulf of Boothia, that was shown on a slide there. Initially, it was over 67,000 square kilometers. That's a huge area, like you said. It's bigger than the Queen Mud Gulf area. And one of these, within that area, there's almost 12,000 square kilometers of Inuit-owned lands. And again, we don't want to lose that ability to negotiate IIBAs through limited use designations from the land use plan. So we want to keep that option open where there's long-term benefits funding through an IIBA, through an Inuit Impact Benefits Agreement. We want the community to benefit. That's the sole reason why the Nunavut Agreement was negotiated, to benefit Inuit, whether it's for conservation areas where Inuit impact benefits are negotiated to benefit communities and the region in perpetuity. Some of these non-legislative programs, conservation programs that the federal government had, is not legislated. Again, it really makes it difficult for a DIO such as Kilometer Inuit Association to have any kind of involvement in trying to negotiate an IIBA if it's a non-legislative program, unlike national parks, national wildlife areas and marine protected areas. If there's opportunity for conservation and conservation areas and Inuit Impact Benefit Agreement, KIA would certainly, is the DI responsible to negotiate IIBAs when it comes to that. I'm trying to be plain and simple, and I apologize for using acronyms again. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. You have further questions? Thank you, Junior York, Hamlet Taluk. I wanted you to understand, and many communities have agreed on many things. How can we open doors? How can we work together? Once we conclude this proceeding, what are we going to face next? We have stated what we want here. What other obstacles are we going to have to face when our path should be just opening so we can have what we want rather than being confrontational in this proceeding? Thank you.
Peter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission. Thank you for the question, Jeannie. There's no intention of trying to be confrontational with the community. The initiative driven by the Hunters and Trappers organization of Spence Bay HTO was given money from Environment Climate Change Canada for consultations on a purpose to establish and make aware of the other communities of that process that the HTO was taking, so Hunters and Trappers was taken to establish an indigenous protected conservation area. And it does affect other communities. There's lands that were selected by Kugaljuk, Joe Haven. The consultations do have to take place there, and it's not like anybody being confrontational. It does take a bit of time for that, and a process that sometimes is very slow. It does take a long time to create and establish conservation, national parks, marine protected areas. It does take a long time, and we try our best to ensure that. When I say we tries its best to ensure that we find a solution to move these things forward for the community.
Thank you.
David?
David? Thank you, Chair. David Tutalik, Talukyok, Hamlet Councillor. I am representing my community, and my concern, I will express it either today or tomorrow. You as a planning commission, while you are here, and KIA at the table. I will just say what I have in mind. I know and I have heard back in 1970s and early 80s, before the Planning Commission came into being, and KIA as an organization was in infancy. My late father, Adam Tutalik, attended numerous meetings at the time when KIA started, and our language to him was very important. And CBC, Iqaluit, CBC, Kivalek, and nearby radio stations at Kitikmute or from Western Arctic, CBC radio as well. But as of today, we have nothing in this region. I'm just telling you what many things we lack in this region. Our syllabics, it's our writing system. I don't know if all of you in the delegation table can use it. I just want to bring this up that it should be one of our priorities in language preservation. I use it, and I have saving this concern I have for tomorrow's meeting, but since both parties who are able to make decisions and try to get something done, so I'm saying it now that one of our many concerns is the language. CBC in other regions are pretty active. They have their own programming and none over here. So I mention it just to show what we lack. Thank you. I understand you. It's a bit of our topic, but we've heard it. Paul?
On that side.
Paul Igualak,
KRWB.
Continued Wildlife Board.
Like we heard here already, that the KIA and Tuluk Rock, our Tuchak project has been going on for a while. I think it's time for the KIA and our Tuchak project staff and board work on this together. Not make it so legal. It's part of our, how do you say it now? It's part of our inherited right to collaborate with each other and make each other understand. That's my comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
That was a comment.
That was a comment. It was not a question. Thank you. Any further questions to the subject? To the panel, their presentation. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Viola
Niberkiak, Tuluk Rock, HTO.
Board member.
Board member.
Like again, what I said this morning is that you're here because we're here as Inuit people representing our community. You're here because we're here. Number of years ago, as Jimmy said, our elders, they passed on. They meet in the evenings trying to protect our hunting grounds, our campsites from mining, exploration. That's our way of life. That's our identity. You can't change that. It comes to our way of life, a lifestyle. It comes to our dignity. It comes to traditions, values, customs. That's our way of life. That's all we know. That's how we survive. And that's how we'll continue to strive. End of the day, our elders, it was not about money. They freely gathered together just to protect our land, just to protect our hunting ground. just to protect our shores and our lakes and rivers. You mentioned that KIA has different aspects for different sectors, and you talked about balance. They need balance in every different sector. It needs balance for every community. You can't make it different. You have to keep it together. Like Jimmy said, it's in the article. I don't understand why a community, a community has to negotiate with its very own Inuit association. You have to be open-minded. You have to accept their values, their tradition. You're talking about another community here, and you want them to live this way. How you're trying to force us to live as Kitikmeot Inuit Association, board members, consultants, you're telling us, you live this way. You live this way, I tell you how to live. End of the day, you're not going home to that family. So, like again, you're here because we're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Okay, go ahead, Peter.
Good Commissioners, and thank you for your questions and comments, Viola. I probably did not make myself too clear when I used acronyms earlier. The negotiation does not happen when it comes to Inuit Impact Benefit Agreements. It does not happen with a community and Kitikmeot Inuit Association. It does happen with Government of Canada or even Government of Nunavut, depending on the type of conservation area that the community wants. You're right. Every elected organization, community puts out a lot of efforts to keep its people, to try and bring their people out of poverty, and there are a certain number of different ways. But when it comes to the Nunavut Agreement and having jurisdiction and decision-making powers on Inuit-owned lands, that's exactly why the Nunavut Agreement was negotiated by our elders, some of them that are no longer here. And the objective and the end result that the negotiators and Inuit wanted was benefits for a better life and decision-making powers on things that happen around them, around their communities and on their land. When it comes to selected lands, Inuit-owned land parcels, Inuit do have a say, communities do have a say on what type of designation, whether they want to use it for conservation, fishing lodge, protected for wildlife. That's something that has to go through Kitikmeot Inuit Association as they have DIO functions, designated Inuit organizational functions and responsibilities that were passed on from NTIs through the Nunavut Agreement. And through this process, it's the best way to get all the communities involved in what they want and have that decision-making powers and authority to try and, I'm not going to say prevent poverty within the community, but the end result of the Nunavut Agreement is to try and gain more benefits from the lands for Inuit and the Inuit community. Tayo mawhana, kuna nene.
Kuya Namik, Namatuk. Do you have more questions or you're good? I don't have any other names. If there's other questions from the communities, other communities, Diego.
Thank you, Chair. Joe Ashibak Talukwa, HTO Chair. What I have to say is not all that good, especially to Kitagmute area there. During the general election, when we were given plebiscite to give us Nunavut, our leaders at that time also participated in the process. It was a joyful occasion, especially with our elders who were instrumental. Many are gone now, and at the time we thought now we are finally the masters of our own land. Now, as the years progress, different bodies have different agendas and nothing is coming into place. Here in Kitagmute, the communities, they're hungry, food insecurity, no abilities to acquire more food. There's no benefits. Many have no hunting equipment. Our youngsters, the suicide rate is terrible, although I think it's everywhere in Nunavut, because there's nothing to hope for, nothing to gain. They have nothing. We are becoming more and more adversaries trying to create something which is not coming to a reality. People, organization who said will be there for us to help us. Now that is not the case. Decisions made are becoming very harmful. And I think I can even say we didn't have these problems before Nunavut. No employment, people hungry, food insecurity, no hunting equipment. And I will say this again in English.
I would like to speak in English to the last bit of my comment. It's been decades now already, almost. We got Nunavut. How many more decades are we going to wait until we iron out the technicalities of ownership and wanting to control our resources and our livelihood? And all the while, we're losing our young people. We lack. Here we are sitting, munching. There's food available here. 3 meals a day. Out there, there's people starving, hungry, asking for food. They have nothing. How we sit here and talk about technicalities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
That was more of a comment.
That was more of a comment than question.
Solomon, we're here.
Thank you, Chair. Charlemagne Catholic Hamlet. I have been listening all day, and it's interesting and understandable. Now, I think KIA is a body. When there are disagreement with this body, KIA have assisted many groups in different projects and giving out vouchers. I'm just saying to this organization, I appreciate your efforts. And people told me, I've heard it, and people claim that there is hunger, they lack everything. Yes, it's true, even in my hometown. But I also, at the same time, understand that our grandchildren, our family, not every household, and when social assistance and other benefits in terms of money comes, it's used for illicit drugs and to the bootleggers. This is why we are hungry. This is why we turn to the families who are being responsible for their finances. And we are approached, we have families, we have children, and we cannot just give away what we have because we were careful with what we have. I just want to say this because not all of us are hungry by somebody else's fault. Thank you. Jeannie, you have a comment? I asked a question earlier. When KIA had a meeting in this community, Amanda Main and Kovalak and I came to make a presentation on Botia Peninsula. What we thought, what it might be a protection to the communities near to it, and small outpost camps. And when it comes to land, what KIA lacks is to find what people think when it comes to land. So I've heard this today from Kovilak, and Amanda Main's request at that time was never answered. You heard it? And you told us also that you are always in communities, meeting with the public in each community. Have you directly communicated with hamlet councils in my community? Have you sought their advice how to best approach our need? And if you have not met with local authorities, you should meet them as KIA body. Thank you.
Peter? Commissioners.
Thank you for your question, Jeannie.
Sorry. As staffers, we don't make those, we get our direction from our leadership on these types of situations. You mentioned outpost camps, where outpost camps can be established, and consultation. The staff is listening, and we certainly bring it up to our leadership. You indicated that there was a KIA board meeting. We'll have to go back and look at that, because at times our direction is different from some of these things that do take place, but we'll take your question as noted and hopefully get back to you in writing. Taima Iksiwota.
Thank you, Chair Jeannie. Do you have any more further comments? I will clarify this in English.
A few years ago, I believe it was 4 years ago,
we had a KIA AGM here in Cambridge Bay, right in this room. Kuvalak Ashuvak and Amanda Main did a presentation to KIA board requesting the Aqueduct project. They were basically asking the same thing we did this morning, but there was just two of them a few years ago. And my question is, has KIA staff met with the community boards to discuss this issue? Because the consultant there said usually when there's a request from the community, they meet with the community board and hear the community people about the situation. So I don't know why we slipped through the cracks. I'm frustrated. Especially hearing we're not supported from our own Inuit firm. That makes me frustrated, and I wasn't given the answer that if you guys met with the, what you call CBC, Kuyanami.
Kuyanami? Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, Jota. Thank you, Commissioners. Again, thank you, Jeannie, for your question. Maybe the question wasn't too clear to me, but you indicated that the consultant has indicated that there is a process when there's a request for land use on Inuit-owned lands. The first thing that happens is it's reviewed by KIA staff and goes to the Community Beneficiaries Committee, who evaluated that request, assessed the request, and makes a recommendation to the KIA Lands Department on whether the proponent of the request is allowed or not allowed for certain situations, depending on what type of request is made by proponents. And the community beneficiary committee is involved in that process. I hope I make myself clear, but I do apologize that you're feeling frustrated. Like most other organizations and folks, there's always that element of frustration when things move too slow, and certainly here at the staff level, we apologize for your frustration. At the end of the day, everybody does their best to try and move files along, and things do have to come together to move files forward, and we always need the community's help at the same time. It's not only the community needing KIA's help, we do need the community's assistance and input too at the same time. I hope I'm close to answering your question.
Matigo Jeannie, you still have a question? Same person?
Thank you.
Jeannie Ubruk,
Hamlet Talokluak.
Thank you for the answer. I still didn't get an answer if you met with Talokluak CBC community board members. I honestly believe that me in my heart that we were never taken seriously. That's how come we're here today like this, with a big gap between our representative. My NTI number goes through KIA. I really don't matter. That's how I feel right now. I thought it was a big thing when Joe Ashubak asked that time, and we don't have progress today. I'm just airing out my frustration, so I'm going to quit at that. Thank you.
That was more of a comment. Tamangat, is there any other questions? I don't have any names, so I'm going to go with the registered participant. If there's any question from down there from presentation this afternoon. I don't see any hand.
Thank you. Yeah, community members who were delayed are in town. I think we'll resume tomorrow morning. It's late in the day, so we'll come back at 9 tomorrow. And the delegation can then give their presentation.
Tomorrow we can continue.
It is okay.
Adjourn for the day.